No.
Hi everybody. Welcome to this webinar from SiteCare about infection control. So we're going to be looking at a little bit around the current situation of the lockdown and COVID-19 and thinking about how things are going to change when we go back to our practice and start seeing patients again. My name is Anthony Blackman. I'm Director of Training at Insight Optical Training, and you're going to listen to me for the next hour or so. My background is not in optics originally. I started off in biological sciences, my undergraduate degree, spending a year working on microbiology. I then did some work with the Royal Society of Biology and the Royal Society of Public Health before coming into optics. I currently work as a dispensing optician and contact lens optician, although like most of you, I'm probably furloughed at home for a little bit longer yet. And then most of recent qualifications, my MSc in optometry. So at the end of this session, there's going to be some slides available online and a recording will go up as well. If you need to contact me, then you've got my email address on the screen as well, and this will come up at the end. So we've got a few objectives for our session today. The first thing I'm going to look at is thinking about hand hygiene and how that can prevent the spread of infections between people. We're going to look at the PPE, because I'm sure we've got lots of questions about that, what people need, when they're going to wear it. We're going to spend a bit of time looking at how we're going to manage infection, prevent infection within the practice with good infection control measures. And then we're going to think about what the patient journey is going to look like when we do reopen fully and start seeing patients for routine site tests. So the focus at the moment is around COVID-19 or coronavirus 2019. You might have seen some of the pictures like this in newspapers. They're quite pretty diagrams to show you what the virus looks like. We'll see here that the main thing about the virus is you've got the DNA and the RNA in the centre, and this is protected by a lipid membrane shown here in red. And it's that membrane that allows the virus to survive so long outside the body and on surfaces. And that's why we need to be careful with our infection control and how we keep the practices clean. The name coronavirus comes from these little proteins or glycoproteins shown in purple in the picture. They're thought to resemble crowns, and this is what helps the virus attach and enter cells. So that's why it's called coronavirus, from Latin for crown. There's quite a large group of coronaviruses, most of them found in different animals. Very few infect humans, and most quite mildly. However, in more recent years, there have been a couple of more high-profile infections. So we had the SARS outbreak in 2003, and that had a death rate of around 11%. More recently, in 2012, there was a Middle East version called MERS, or Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. That only affected about 12 countries, and that came from camels. But that had a death rate of 35%, so much higher than the current coronavirus that we're dealing with. Based on the stats of this week, the death rate so far for coronavirus is just under 7%. As governments improve their testing and spread testing to the wider community, it's quite likely that we're going to drop down to around about 6%. But still quite high compared to things like normal seasonal flu, that on a rolling 10-year average has a death rate of less than 1%. So we're dealing with quite an unusual situation at the moment. What we do know is that the coronaviruses do spread very quickly and very easily. And there's two main different methods of transmission that are used. The first thing is through droplets of moisture. So that's usually coming from coughing and sneezing. And through that transmission from person to person, and that's why the government had that big push for the 2-metre social distancing, is that at that distance, you can't then catch it from someone coughing or sneezing. The droplets will then drop to the floor. The other method of transmission is through direct contact with contaminated items. There's somebody that might cough or sneeze, get it on their hands, then touch something like a door handle. Somebody else comes along an hour later, touches the same door handle. They pick up the virus, they then touch their nose or mouth or eyes and pass the virus on to themselves that way. So we need to control both of those forms of transmission to prevent further infections. So the main route of transmission is going to be through our hands and touching things, and then touching our faces. We actually touch faces quite a lot during the day without realising it. A lot of subconscious actions of touching nose and lips and eyes. But we're not actually very good at hand hygiene. The picture shown here shows the different areas that typically missed, and there have been quite a few studies repeated over several years that show the same thing, that the same areas get missed on most people. So although the government is saying to us, washing our hands for 20 seconds or using hand sanitizer with a minimum of 60% alcohol, we're still not getting full protection and full coverage of our hands. We can see here that typically it's these areas between the fingers that get missed. Most of the thumbs get missed, and also on the tips of our fingers as well. So whether it's using proper hand soap 20 seconds or using a high alcohol rub, and it's that 60% alcohol that helps to disrupt that lipid membrane of the virus and helps to kill it. So let's have a little think about what we need to be doing when you're washing your hands. Starting with wet hands and applying the soap, working it across the palms to cover the biggest surface area. Then actually working in between the fingers, because that will be getting into those little areas that get missed. Make sure we're catching those little crevices there. Putting our hands together to get it right into the nails and around the tips of the fingers. Paying special attention then to our thumbs. And that rotation right around the thumb, all 360 degrees. Working the palms to make sure we get under the fingernails as well. And then properly drying the hands after rinsing off all the soap residues. So indeed that should take about 20 seconds, because that's quite a few steps that most of us don't actually do. Most people just rub their hands together and miss most of it. If we're using alcohol gel and a minimum of 60% alcohol, then it's a pretty similar process really. We're rubbing it across the hands, getting in between the fingers, going into the tips of the fingers and the nails, around the thumbs, and then make sure our hands are properly dried before we move on. Also make sure we go right down to the wrist and not just missing part of the hand. Similarly, removing things like rings and other bits of jewellery where the viruses can stick, and then you end up putting it back on and then contaminating your hands. And some people say, well, which is better, using soap or using alcohol gel? Well, the recommendation is that we should be washing our hands for at least 20 seconds, doing that singing happy birthday twice, doing it before we eat anything, after using the bathroom, if our hands are visibly dirty, because hand sanitizer doesn't actually remove dirt, it just is there to remove bacteria and viruses. Similarly, if you end up touching a patient, washing your hands if you're ungloved. On arrival at work, wash your hands first thing you do when you get in the door, and similarly when you come home from work, as soon as you get home, you're washing your hands. Other instances we can think about hand sanitizer, and that's quite good because if we end up overwashing our hands, that's bad for the skin. So that leads to cracked and damaged and dry skin, and that can then lead to infections of the skin, which we don't want. So we can make sure we're not using water that's too hot, and that we are probably rinsing off the hand soaps afterwards. So using hand sanitizer is a good option in those in-between stages to make sure we're not overwashing our hands, but still keeping them free from bacteria. So nice clean hands. Now let's think about protecting the rest of us. So PPE, or personal protective equipment. Now there are a few different categories of areas we can protect. Now the recommendation for healthcare is that we end up first of all protecting our face and our eyes, particularly so we can't touch our eyes. We think about some kind of mask, whether that's a surgical mask or a proper respirator, to make sure that's protecting our nose and mouth together. We think about aprons, protect our clothing. So aprons are single use, as are gloves, whereas the masks and the face or eye protection are going to be for sessional use. So that means that we wear them then until the end of the day, or until we're taking them off, perhaps to have lunch, for example. There is no requirement or recommendations for things like head coverings, head caps, shoe coverings, or long sleeve gowns. That's more for actual hospital settings where they're actually dealing with COVID patients. So what do we actually need in optical practice? Well, for optometrists, the guidance is actually quite clear at the moment. We need to make sure that optometrists are masked. So that could be a surgical mask or respirator, and we'll show you the difference between those. There needs to be some kind of eye protection or face shield or visor to again prevent touching of eyes. And obviously gloves and aprons, single use for each patient. For dispensing staff or dispensing opticians, the guidance is much less clear. However, the use of a mask is recommended, as well as actually about gowns or gloves or aprons if we can't get 2 meters social distance. So when we're doing direct patient interaction, make sure we've got those masks and gloves on. But if you're just actually doing repair at the back, then it's not so clear whether you need as much PPE. For reception staff, there actually is no guidance at the moment, other than the fact that if reception staff can't maintain 2 meter social distancing, then it's recommended that they wear a mask. Now, it might be that staff are more than 2 meters away, but they will still want to wear a mask, just for that psychological aspect of feeling safer. There are other things we can do in the practice, such as those perspex screens around the secretary desk to help provide extra protection to people. But the main thing really to think about is that it's trying to keep social distancing where possible, and remembering that to have the right PPE and to dispose of it as well, which we're going to cover in a moment. So with the different items that optometrists are going to be wearing, there's a certain order to how they go on and off, so the donning and doffing, we call it. So start with making sure you've got clean hands, so hand sanitizer or washing our hands, applying the apron over the neck and tying it around the back to cover the front, protect our clothing. Then need to think about the face covering, so the mask or respirator. Try not to touch the mask too much. Then applying our eye or face protection, so that's our eye protectors or shield. And then the last thing you apply then is the gloves. When it comes to removing or doffing your PPE, start by removing the gloves first. Then you make washing your hand, because they've been gloved for some time. Moving the apron, but carefully dropping it down and folding over itself so that what was exposed now on the inside. Moving our eye protection or face protection. And then last of all, removing our masks. Remembering, of course, that these items could in theory be contaminated with bacteria and viruses, so again, ending that with more hand hygiene. So there's 2 main types of mouth covering. We have masks or respirators. Now, a lot of people, we're going around with wearing masks, so the main type is a type 2R. You can get a type 1 and type 2, but for coronaviruses, they're not thought to be as effective. The type 2R is what we're looking for because they have that triple layer, more moisture resistant. The respirator, on the other hand, is more of a cup that actually is fixed over the nose and mouth. So the respirator can provide a closer fitting, but as the diagram on the right here shows, that actually if people have a lot of sort of facial hair, that can affect the close fitting of the respirator and make it less effective. So for some people, a mask will be better. For other people, a respirator might be better. Respirators, we have more choice. The best type really would be an FFP3, so a filtered face piece class 3. You can get a class 2 as available as an alternative, and if you can't get either of those, then an N95 mask is also okay from the Health and Safety Executive. All 3 of these will provide that good protection against coronaviruses in general. Remember, of course, that any of these coverings are sessional use, so you can wear them for multiple patients. However, do replace them if they become damaged or dirty or damp. If you do take them off, then don't reuse them and reapply them. If it comes off, it stays off. Also remember that try not to touch the mask too much. You don't want to contaminate it. And when you remove them, then try not to touch the inside, because that again could be contaminated with bacteria and viruses. If you're wearing any face or eye protection, that's sessional use, as is the mask and respirator, where the eye protection can be disinfected with 70% alcohol. So here's the respirator. This is more of a cup designed for them to fit more snugly over. You hold it, the outside, place it over the nose and mouth. We need to make sure we're covering both. There's no point covering one or the other. It needs to be both that are covered. There are two straps, so we apply one to the top of the ear, one goes at the base of the hairline on the neck. You then readjust it to make sure you've got a good fitting. There is a little clip on the top which you can adjust to make sure you have a good fitting across the nose. And you may find that if you're having problems with like glasses misting up, just check that fitting. It could be that if you improve that fitting, you're going to get less likely to get air escaping up over the glasses. Once the mask is applied, it's good to use a mirror just to check whether it is secure all round and there's no gaps, because if there's gaps, that's where you're going to get an exchange of air. Now, most people, particularly people wandering around and patients, will be using masks instead of respirators. With masks, they have usually have a coloured side, so there'll be a plain side that goes against your mouth, and then there'll be a coloured side. In this picture, it's blue. On the outside, to distinguish which side the mask goes. We shouldn't be touching either side of masks. We should be handling them by the handle. So when you're picking them up, bi-elasticated straps, and they're going straight over the ears. So a little bit quicker and easier to apply. Once you've placed the mask over the nose and mouth, remember we've got to cover both. They then have concertinas, so you can grab the top and bottom edges and just pull those apart just to expand the mask. That's why people have got sort of beards and facial hair. These will cover more of the face. Once you've expanded the fitting outwards to give a good coverage, you can again adjust the little clip at the top over the nose to improve a better, closer fitting, because that's what we need to keep that close fitting at all times. Remembering that when we discard our mask or respirator, in theory they could be contaminated, to make sure we dispose of them properly in a separate PPE bin. As another reminder, we've got a little poster of do's and don'ts. Now the pictures we're showing you here are available as a downloadable handout. So there's be one handout for the slides of presentation, another one with A4 posters for you to download and have a better look at, covering the PPE and hand washing. But on masks, because they have the most potential to have the highest contamination of bacteria and viruses, it's remembering looking after them, replacing them if they're damaged or dirty or damp. Don't play with the mask. Once it comes off, it stays off and discard it. Remembering not to touch it with your hands. If you don't touching it, then carry out hand hygiene afterwards. Gloves. So in terms of coronavirus protection, it doesn't matter that much which gloves you use, whether it's vinyl or nitrile gloves. The main thing really is that they are disposable, so one pair per patient interaction. When removing the gloves, make sure that they're dry. So you don't want to have any moisture on the glove. Make sure they're dry first before you take them off. Otherwise, you end up flicking moisture around. Start with the gloved hand, taking the edge of the other glove, pulling it down the hand. That will then hold one glove. You can then take off the other glove into it. So this way, you are folding what was the outside inwards, and therefore that then is less likely to allow the transfer of material from the glove somewhere else. Because what was the inside now the outside, everything's all contained within, and therefore it's easier to dispose. So like the mask, make sure it goes in a specialised PPE bin. So final one is masks, goggles, respirators, face shields. These are all sessional use. So you can use it for multiple patients. Aprons and gloves, single use, disposing afterwards after each patient, taking them off carefully, putting them in your PPE bin. Also remember that we shouldn't be seeing anybody with COVID-19 symptoms either now or in the future. And when you're getting ready for your PPE, make sure you've got a dedicated area to do it, and make sure you remove the PPE once the patient left the room and you've disinfected the room. Now, this is going to generate quite a bit of waste, and we've got to think about how we deal with that. Most of us don't have special healthcare waste contracts, and if you try and look for them now, they're going to be quite expensive. So NHS England and Public Health England have given the guidance that because of how long coronavirus can stay on the surface, what we should do is have PPE waste kept separate from other waste, that when the bin is full or at the end of the day we empty it, we double bag that waste, and that we store it for 72 hours. After 72 hours, the virus is quite likely to be inactivated and not going to pose a risk, and therefore we can then dispose of those bags after 72 hours in the normal way. So let's have a little think now about the patient journey. And the AOP have got a couple of different flow charts on their website about this. But the main thing we think about when we're seeing patients at the moment, in the current situation of emergency eye care and going forward for the next couple of months, is trying to triage that urgency and how important the eye care is going to be, and whether we need to actually see these patients. So things to think about are, what's the risk of harm if we don't see the patient? You know, is their condition going to get worse? Is it sight threatening? Is the patient going to benefit from the treatment and improve the visual acuity? So particularly if they're like a key worker and they need it for work. And actually, what's going to be the implication of the care on their life? Is it going to add a meaningful benefit, or is it only add a slight benefit? So, you know, someone that's just going to need an 025 change prescription, that's a very minimal improvement or benefit. So at the moment, it's a case of just seeing those essential patient only, and those that are really going to benefit and that really need our care. Remembering that means we screen patients for COVID-19 symptoms. So asking those questions about temperature and coughing, and not seeing anybody that's got those symptoms. If you do come across any patients like that, they need to be seen by the hospital because they've got full PPE equipment and the COVID wards. Now, at the moment, because we're being a bit more selective of who we see, the Royal College of Ophthalmologists have given some guidance out for healthcare professionals in general. Just really reiterating the point that we're going to have patients that are going to be reluctant to want to attend for health appointments because of whether that's because they're shielding or because of risk or because they're just not sure. So when we're speaking to our patients, we need to make sure that we are reassuring them about the care we can offer and about what levels of protection we put in place, such as PPE, additional hand hygiene, cleanliness through the day, infection control measures, just so they are reassured. We don't want is patients putting off going for help when they've got a serious problem, therefore leading to sight loss because they've just not wanted to go out. And when it comes to routine appointments, there are going to be a lot of patients that are going to want to delay attending for appointments and checkups, particularly those in the shielding groups, so they're over 70 of those with a health condition, which obviously for us, so in practice, is quite a large portion of our database. I know diabetics and over 70s. And in this time where we're not seeing everybody, there is a theoretical risk of medico-legal action. So therefore, it's imperative that we do keep really clear records of every patient interaction, the advice that we've given and why it is, and the fact that it is COVID-19. There are something we may not be able to do, and that is documented. So we've got that evidence to back it up. So if there was a case brought against us, we can show the evidence on the records that we did the best that we could in the situation, and that we did provide some level of care with the tools we had available. So think about where we are with current essential and emergency eye care. We're hopefully soon going to be moving to the next stage once the government finally decides to restart normal care, and we're going to start seeing more patients. So across England, we had the CEWS service that's been started, so the COVID Emergency Eye Care Service. It's pretty similar to MECS. About 60% of CCGs in England have commissioned this service now. So it goes to show that actually commissioning can happen quite quickly. Unfortunately, it's not all areas, so there is, conversely to that, a theory of actually should some of these services be centrally commissioned rather than locally commissioned. But with queues, it covers similar sorts of things to MEX. So you've got your visual distortions, painful eyes, red eyes, flashing lights, floaters, double vision. And with a queues appointment, it starts with a triage service. So remotely phoning or video calling the patient to discuss their symptoms. Now you might have triage forms already. I know things like collectometrists have a triage form. If you're on the SiteCare Facebook group, there's a triage form on there you can download as well. And that will determine whether the patient then needs to attend for a face-to-face appointment. And under the queues scheme, the person doing the triage remotely doesn't have to be the same practitioner that sees them for the appointment. So it might be that you do the triage, but that somebody else sees them. That could be because either you don't have queues in your area that they do, or perhaps you don't have the right equipment or the right PPE, or maybe they need to see an IP optom, or maybe it's even travel to see somebody else. So it doesn't have to be the same practitioner. With queues, the fees are agreed locally, so it might be that different parts of the country are paying a different amount for this service, but at least it's something coming in. And because it's a commission service, it is completely separate from any GOS payments we might be getting during this time. So we don't have to worry about them conflicting, they are completely separate schemes. So we're going to be using a lot of virtual consultations. The next two slides got quite a lot of information on, so that's why you might want to just download the handout afterwards instead. Now, the guidance comes from mainly the Royal College of Ophthalmologists, but also NHS England. It's important with these video consultations that they are planned properly. So that's not just doing the consultation, but it's having time before and after to prepare and also complete records afterwards. It's important to make sure you've got the patient's records with you to check through and read through them in advance. It's also good to actually email the patient and send them information about the virtual consultation. So what you want them to do, how they're going to access the service, what information you want them to provide. It's also important under GDPR and data protection that we're not storing patient information on our own devices. So it could be that you're doing virtual consultations from work, you might be doing them from home. If you aren't using your own devices, then make sure you're deleting information off of there and not storing any patient details. Similarly, you should make sure you're using a safe internet connection. So no public Wi-Fi hubs. Make sure your device has the right up-to-date antivirus, firewall, etc. When starting the call, make sure you have patient consent for carrying out a video consultation. And also remember about privacy, so you're keeping your door shut, not having a conversation overheard. If there's anybody else with you in the room, make sure the patient is aware of that. Similarly, ask the patient if they have somebody else with them as well, so that can be noted on the records. We should be recording these consultations as we would a normal site test, so you can use a normal record card format for this. Bear in mind to remember to record that record as a COVID-19 record, so that's why you may be some areas not filled in. But also be patient with your patients. You know, we're getting used to the system, they won't be familiar with it either. Most of them may never done anything, like this sort of FaceTime or virtual consultation before. So don't worry, they might have some issues as well. But also consider vulnerable groups, think about children, and they might want to have a parent with them while they're doing the consultation, to help them answer questions. They might be a bit nervous of doing this as well. I was thinking about patients with hearing problems. So they might be looking at your face, trying to lip reading, so make sure you've got good lighting. Don't end up talking while you're looking down, making notes. Keep your face on show to them. Also make sure you've got the patient's contact details, such as phone number. So if the call is lost, you can contact them to reschedule. It should be the clinician that starts and ends the appointment, and if the call is lost, then you reinitiate it. At the start, make sure that you can both hear each other clearly and that you can see each other. Go through a normal explanation of who you are, how this appointment is going to work, because it's a little bit different to your normal site tests. and give them a rough idea of how long the consultation is going to last. Make sure you've got the right patient. It's not just name, but checking exact date of birth and address as well. And when you're turned away to do things, make sure you inform the patient they can't see what you're doing. So if you're making some notes or reading a letter, let them know that what you are doing, because they can't tell as they would do in a normal face-to-face consultation. Remember throughout the appointment also check their understanding and if they've got any questions as well. Properly end the call and consider actions afterwards, such as advising of maybe a follow-up appointment to check their symptoms, or email them information. So if they've got flashing lights or floaters, emailing them a leaflet from AOP or College Optometrist. There's quite a few leaflets out that we can get hold of, and just email those as follow-up advice to the patients. The Royal College of Ophthalmologists also strongly suggest that we gather patient feedback from these consultations, because that will help us improve the service we're providing and be a good feedback to make these work. We don't know how long we're going to be doing these for. Now, to help with home consultations, the College of Optometrists had developed a home visual acuity chart. This A4 sheet can be downloaded from their website. The idea is that you email it for the patient to print out at home. They use it at 3 meters, and it gives a rough idea of visual acuity. Now, the patient's version of the chart just says line 1, line 2, line 3, and line 4. There's a practitioner version which details visual acuity and how to convert that into a rough guide for VAs. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing, and it will give you some information on what the patient's visual acuity is. While you're downloading that form, there's also other forms on the college website, including telephone review forms and forms for supplying specs and contact lenses remotely. Just a note about domiciliary. So in the devolved nations, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, domiciliary has been suspended. England hasn't actually issued that. However, it's quite likely we're not going to be doing that. The guidance on home visits in general for healthcare workers is that they can continue if people aren't self-isolated or shielding group, but in which case we wouldn't normally be seeing them anyway. And we need to maintain social distancing, good hand and respiratory hygiene, which can be difficult to do for domiciliary work. So in practical terms, we're not really been doing these for some time yet until we're told that these services are restarting. There's also been lots of queries about contact lenses. So there's been no strong evidence to suggest that wearing contact lenses increases anybody's risk of contracting COVID-19, and the BCLA and other organisations have looked at this, reviewed it, published guidance on it. So patients with contact lenses can continue to wear them as normal. They should only stop wearing the contact lenses if they develop COVID-19 symptoms, or if they're in a household where somebody has developed symptoms. Hopefully they maintain good hand hygiene, but we know some patients, particularly contact patients, getting a bit lazy with compliance, but there is no increased risk at the moment. In terms of supplying lenses, we should continue to do so. A lot of manufacturers can do direct patient shipping, which will help keep that supply going, and obviously keep a little bit of money coming into the practice. When patients come overdue, we can do some virtual consultations. So as a CLO, going back a few weeks before I was furloughed, I did a couple of these consultations. They're not ideal, but it is some kind of patient interaction. You can talk to them about their wearing schedule, their materials, the lenses, how they're wearing them, what their compliance is like, and whether having any questions or issues with them. So what we did at work is, rather than putting people on the 12-month recall, we actually moved into a 6-month recall, thinking that actually by the time that 6 months is up, we might be able to actually start seeing proper appointments and do a proper contact lens checkup on them. Also, reminding patients if they do have any problems or emergencies, then they should still contact us. So we're not going to be doing any new fits at the moment, unless it's for perhaps an essential key worker, such as a nurse that's having to wear contact lenses under their PPE, for example. So that's current emergency eye care. The next phase is going to be when we start seeing patients for routine sight tests. We don't know when that's going to be. The NHS hasn't said yet, but and we need to be prepared for when that does happen, that we can start seeing patients as quickly as possible to keep the practices going again. Now, it's not going to be seeing groups in the shielding category. We're going to be seeing non-shielding patients first. It's important that we're screening these patients, make sure they haven't got COVID-19 symptoms or at risk of having COVID-19. And if we do have to see a vulnerable person, it's probably going to still be via the virtual consultation, so that process is going to continue for some months to come. Also, remember to check your local referral protocols. So at the moment, there's no cataract surgery happening, so there's no point in referring patients at the moment because they're just going to be sitting on a dead list. So just keeping an eye on what's happening locally with the hospitals. Now, when we do start seeing patients or contacting patients, it'd be advisable not to start with your normal recall letters. Instead, contact your patients directly. So we're going to have lists of which patients are now due site tests or overdue site tests. And it's important that we ring the patients after checking their records. Ask them a few questions just to identify if they're in that risk group or a shielding group, because if they are, then we're going to want to delay seeing them. Also checking if they've got any COVID-19 symptoms, so again, that cough or temperature. When it comes to booking patients in, consider what your hours are going to be. Do you start doing some stretched days? I know some practices are going to start doing additional days in the weeks of Sundays, or they're going to just do a slightly longer working day. And that's mainly because we're going to be seeing less patients in one go. We're going to try and limit how many people in the practice. So to still see a larger number of patients, just by extending the day means we can just see a couple more people to help work through. There's going to be a backlog of lots of, thousands of site tests. Now, you want to reassure patients that you are open, providing good eye care, and that you've got good infection control procedures in place to protect them. It's also good to make sure you've got a good list and log every patient you're interacting with each day and who's in the practice. This is going to be helpful as part of the track and trace scheme. So before the patient comes in, consider starting with a remote consultation, perhaps to ascertain their priority or triage any problems. Booking the appointments longer than normal. That isn't because we're going to be spending longer with the patient, but this additional time will allow time for donning the PPE, disinfecting the equipment, and doing pre-screening. Remember that when the patient arrives, we're still going to want to check they've not got any symptoms. And consider having entry by appointment only, so you can control how many people are coming into the practice. So you might want to adjust your diary so you've perhaps got dispensing clinics or collection clinics. And also consider the benefits of having postal services to patients. So posting their glasses, contact lenses, if you've done a repair, somebody posting it back to them. And it's all really down to the fact we're trying to limit how many people are going to be in the practice at any one time, because social distancing is going to be with us for some time. So when these patients do start to arrive, we can hopefully want them to be masked. A lot of people are travelling around with masks, but for the patient setting, in practice, we're still going to want them to be masked. Ideally, just the patient on their own, so not bringing relatives with them. Again, let's minimise how many people in the practice. Once they come in, first thing we want them to do is have hand hygiene, whether it's washing the sink or using hand sanitizer. Checking what their symptoms are, they haven't got any symptoms of COVID-19, and trying to stick to 2 metre social distancing where possible in the practice. So rather than having them come straight at the reception desk, actually can that receptionist still see them from 2 metres away to wave them, acknowledge they've entered, get them to do hand hygiene. So perhaps having hand sanitizer near the door rather than up on the reception desk where they've got to get near reception staff. And also because we're having protection for reception staff for some of those perspex screens you might have seen. Now, at the moment, the requirement of signatures on GOS forms has been suspended. We don't know what's going to be for, but it does mean at the moment we haven't got to worry about getting those signatures on any forms. Obviously, most site testing is currently suspended. When it restarts, hopefully this requirement for signatures will still be withdrawn to help ease patient flow. So here we go. Here's a picture of a practice here. We've got the nice big perspex screens here. So these tall screens are going to protect the reception staff, but still allow that direct face-to-face communication with patients. So having this in place means the reception staff don't use as much PPE, although they might still feel safe having the mask on. This is going to provide a lot of protection. And the right, I've got these freestanding hand sanitized units that you might want by the front door. So companies such as Central Style do these. And just the way then the patient hasn't got to come right up to the reception desk in order to use hand sanitizer, they can do it from the door. They haven't got to come near that reception desk then. So once they come in, make sure the waiting area, you've got chairs 2 meters apart to maintain social distancing. And then we're going to start with pre-screening. So we still want to do pre-screening, so we want to minimise the contact time in the consulting room. We want to do the one patient policy. So if you've got quite a small pre-screening area, that's fine. Larger practices that have got quite big pre-screening areas, they might, perhaps have 2 or 3 patients in there at once doing different tests. At the moment, we just want to minimise patients that are there. And consider having all pre-screening done by the optometrist. And this is mainly because they're going to be in full PPE, so they're best protected to be that close to the patient, because you can't do pre-screen at less than 2 meter distances. It's going to be less than that. And also the disinfection equipment. I'm going to come on to that a bit later on. And also making sure your patient's got that mask covering, because that's going to help with their protection as they're breathing with equipment. Also looking at your imaging equipment. So if you've got a fundus camera, perhaps an Optomap or OCT, doing those as part of pre-screen is going to help save you time in the room and mean you get away with doing less ophthalmoscopy. You still want ophthalmoscopy, but it's going to make life a little bit easier and quicker. Also, you've also got an ultra factor that might help your patient journey and minimise time of consulting in close contact with the patient. A lot of us do pressures as part of our pre-screen, and the World College of Ophthalmologists have given guidance that although COVID-19 has a very low load in the tear film and the conjunctiva, there is potential risk of aerosol. So NCTs are out. We shouldn't be doing non-contact optometry at the moment because of the risk of the aerosol. So the recommendation is that we use Goldman, but also that we consider if IOPs are really necessary for individual patients using your clinical judgment rather than just IOPs. Everybody to think about whether it's necessary for the patient. So with visual fields, traditionally done on lots of patients routinely, but the guidance at the moment is that we need to think about whether it's necessary for that individual patient. Although the patient is wearing a mask, if you've got one of those larger field machines that has bulbs, so like some of the Humphreys and some Henson models, they're breathing into that dome, it's quite difficult to clean those, so there is that risk or theoretical risk. So we need to decide if we do visual fields or not. If you do visual fields, then consider some alternatives. So the picture here is the Thompson digital field screener. This can be run off a laptop at a distance, and it goes onto a touch screen for the patient. So being a touch screen, that's quite easy to disinfect, and it also means that optometrists can be further away from the patient to conduct the test. There's also iPad apps available. So there's the Melbourne Rapid Field app that's been recommended by the Australian Optometry Association. And you can download that from the App Store. It's not ideal, but it does provide some kind of field screening for patients. So after that, we're going to then go into the consulting room. We want to try and minimise the length of that appointment as possible and try and stay as far away. So with 3 meter room, you should best conduct history and symptoms at 2 meter distance, but trying to keep the rest of the appointment as far away as possible, ideally at least a meter when doing other things such as lab examination. We want to minimise the number of people in the room, so just you and the patient, and avoid touching the patient where possible. So if you're doing sit lamp and you want the patient's lid out of the way, ask the patient perhaps to lift their lid or pull their lower lid down. Try not to do it yourself. Keeps that distance. Make sure once the patient left, we're going to do a good disinfection of the room. So, the chair, the slit lamp, anything else that they might touch, such as door handles, trial frame, phoropter, and avoid doing ophthalmoscopy with an ophthalmoscope. That's simply because with ophthalmology and ophthalmoscope, we get incredibly close to the patient. So using a slit lamp instead with one of those big slit lamp shields, it just keeps that a bit further away from the patient. Also, when you arm slam, try and minimise talking on either side to as little as possible, and let the patient know that you are deliberately trying to keep that down before you start using the slip lamp. Now, some of these patients are going to obviously need dispensing, so we need to think about how we're going to protect ourselves on that. Although there's no real guidance on PPE dispensers, it's quite reasonable to think that when it comes to a patient interaction, that we are gloved, masked, just by that protection, we're getting close to the patient. Now, where possible, to minimise patient contact time, we should think about whether we can do a duplicate pair of previous glasses used in our records to provide the same frame and lenses. Consider whether we can do reglazing. So at work, we've got a tracer. I can go back several years to pull up old traces to order new lenses without again having to be the patient choosing frames or handling their frames. It's just going to help reduce that contact time. If a patient's got a broken pair of glasses, well, can it be repaired? Can new frames be sourced instead? And if we do need to choose new frames, then when doing so, try not to let the patient actually touch the frames. Initially pointing them out, the person dispensing collects the frames in a tray, and then we can sanitize them before the patient tries them on and once they've taken them off. And then we'll go through that cleaning in a moment. And that way the frames then, we know from they've tried on, we disinfect them, they can go back out once they've been cleaned. Cleaning also about other equipment, so perhaps your PD ruler or pupilometer, giving that a good wipe with some alcohol before and after use, and also clean the desk once the patient's gone, in case they've touched that. You might have also a digital measuring system, perhaps some sort of Hoyles, Zeiss or Shamir. A lot of lens manufacturers have got these digital measuring systems, then it just keeps a bit further away rather than going in close to measure the PD. And then once the glasses are ready, thinking about can we post things to patients. I know we've had it for work where people post things through the door for repair, and then we post them back, and it just prevents the need for them to come into the practice and minimising the number of patient interactions, how many people are going to be in the practice at any one time. So let's think about infection control and what chemicals we need. So just around us at home and at work, there's bacteria, viruses, and there's microbes everywhere. So we can see here, all sorts of things from desks, photocopiers, doors, the mouse, keyboards. We carry around a lot of bacteria on our phones. The doors and door handles are going to be contaminated. Any other equipment in the practice, even down to pens. So back in the fact that every member of staff has their own individual pen, they keep it during the day, disinfect during the day, and don't share equipment. That also applies to things like reception desks. So you've got reception desk, one phone, one computer to one person on the desk. Not sharing equipment like that, so you're not going to get any cross contamination. This one we maintain cleaning during the day. So there's a recommendation that we do general housekeeping morning, midday, and evening in order to keep on top of these items, keeping them clean. So when it comes to disinfection and sterilisation, there are different methods that can be used. Heat is commonly used, although not very practical for us to make it practice. Fine in hospitals, but not so easy for us to do. Another method is filtration, but that's really for gases and liquids, so again, not really good for us. We're going to rely on mainly chemical sterilisation. So mainly using chemicals such as sodium hypochlorite, which is found in bleach, and 7% alcohol. Both of those are shown to work very quickly and be very effective against coronaviruses because they dissolve that lipid protective envelope quite quickly, in about a minute. Radiation can also be used, but we're not going to be using ionising X-rays and gamma rays in practice. But we might start seeing more talk about UV radiation, using UV radiation, UVC, to kill bugs because of its germicidal activity. So UVC, we don't normally see that at ground level, normally it's blocked by the ozone layer. But UVC, with its wavelengths of 100 to 280 nanometers, has a peak germicidal activity of 264. At that wavelength, it's absorbed by the DNA, and this has been used for over 100 years now, originally to treat water that can now be used for liquids, solids, gases, and hard surfaces. And what happens is that UV radiation is absorbed by DNA, So we know that UV can cause damage because it causes sunburn on our skin. But in microbes, your bacteria and viruses, it damages the DNA inside them. Because it damages the DNA and RNA, it prevents those microbes from replicating, so they can't cause an infection. So therefore, if they do, if that virus then did get into the body, it can't damage our cells. And there are devices available. So this box here is from CentraStyle. They do 3 different sizes of these. So the smaller ones will do 4 to 8 frames, and there's much bigger ones as well, but you can use it on equipment, hand tools, rulers, things like that. And it's very good because it's quite quick. So in as little as 2 minutes, it starts to kill bugs. It's a non-chemical approach. I'm going to add anything that could react, with some frames. You've got quite sensitive frames like TO90. You can only put in lots of alcohol in there time and again to damage the frames. This is nothing added. It's just put in the box, turn it on. No additional chemicals to buy or extra resources. It's very simple, just pushing a button, and very low maintenance and very quick to do, rather than to clean lots of individual frames. Putting 8 frames in one of these and pressing start and it being done in 5 minutes is going to be much quicker and easier. So rules around disinfection are going to be maintaining wear your PPE, particularly your mask, gloves and aprons. We're handling some of these chemicals, particularly bleach. We don't need flashing that on our skin and clothes. Make sure reading instructions on the packaging to make sure that it's safe to use and what you're using it for, and that it has the right ingredients. So what we're looking for is a 70% alcohol solution or a sodium hypochlorite of 0.5%. Now, most household bleach is 5%, so we can water that down rather than using it neat. So we also want to make sure we're using disposable cloths, so rather than using towels, having lots of wipes or cloths. So in terms of the 70% alcohol, we've got azo wipes. There's also non-alcohol equivalents and Clinell wipes as well. So we can use it on our equipment to disinfect that, and do general disinfection during the day on a hard surface such as desks. When you are cleaning, you should start from the furthest away and go towards you, and start from the top and work downwards. Make sure you've got good hand hygiene, so keep your gloves on, and then give your hand a clean after you've finished the cleaning and remove the gloves. So again, sodium hypochlorite is one of the best things to use on large areas. Along with 70% alcohol, both of those will work. At the moment, we need to make sure we declutter our practices. So the less stuff that's around, the less stuff you've got to clean, and that's going to be a lot easier. Also think about your fabrics and sort of furnishings. They can't easily be cleaned with bleach and get damaged. So it would be easier if you've got things like soft chairs or cushions, get rid of them for now. Have hard surfaces like plastic chairs or wooden chairs that can be easily wiped and kept clean during the day and after each patient's been in. So we've got azo wipes. These are quite popular. I know we've got plenty of these at work now. These are 70% alcohol. So using that on a surface, a minute's contact time, that's going to kill most things. There are alcohol-free versions. So there's Azo Max, which are the alcohol-free equivalent. There's also the Clinell wipes that are also alcohol-free. They have a few different chemicals in to kill bacteria. And Clinell wipes are heavily used in NHS wards for their disinfection properties. So if you've got things like frames, other equipment that's sensitive to alcohol, there are alcohol-free versions you can get. But still use them with gloves on. When you're using these wipes, it's best to work in an S movement, so you're not going over the same area twice. Again, working top down and working towards you. You will find these wipes dry out quite quickly, so don't use them if they become dry. There's no point. They're not going to be effective. And so if they become dirty, again, they're not going to become effective. So discard and get another one. You need to make sure you wait at least a minute for that solution to work, and then it's one wipe per surface. Try not to do multiple objects with it. It's use the wipe. They kind of pack 200 usually, so just use several wipes. Don't try and be stingy and use one wipe over a large area. You're not going to get the same coverage or disinfection. In particular with visual fields and other pre-screen equipment as well, make sure it's turned off before you start to disinfect. Start off by cleaning the outside, the exterior panels and the screens. It's best to spray a cloth first and then use it on your screens and machines. You don't get the spray back. Or think about the chin rests and forehead bars and any patient buttons when the patient might have touched. Perhaps you've got a frame around the headrest. With most build machines, a lot of them, the manufacturer recommend not to clean inside because it can damage the lining inside the bowl. So do check your manufacturer's manual for that, and do consider again the need. Do you actually need to do that field test, or can you use an alternative test that doesn't involve the patient looking into a bowl? So perhaps one of those Thompson system we looked at, the app. Or perhaps some of the smaller field machines that doesn't have a bowl design, it's more telescope design for the patient to look down. So we have a little waste in the practice. We've got our normal waste, we've got our PPE waste, and we've got our cleaning waste. So our PPE, and this has the patient in theory could be contaminated. So we need to keep it separate from normal waste. We need to make sure that when we bag this waste, it's double bagged to help seal it. And we need to hold it for 72 hours because that's enough time for the virus to be deactivated. After that length of time, we can then dispose of the waste in the usual way. Also make sure we're storing it in bins that are lidded, and we're emptying bins at the end of each day. It's also important this time, there's so much to think about. There's a lot of stress going around. We need to make sure we're managing stress and mental health in ourselves and in our work colleagues. So when some of us start going back to work and come off furlough, it's important that we do keep working as a team, celebrate at the end of each day, a job well done. Also make sure that you make time each day to relax and unwind, de-stress from the day. It's going to be stressful. I'm working on a situation, think about infection control all the time. It's also quite important to keep talking. So as friends and family, being part of site care, there's a good network there. You can chat to people through their social media channels, TikTok, through the Facebook group, etc. So important to share problems, solutions, and just chat how the day's gone. It's also important that we keep our staff informed, because it's quite likely we're going to have some staff furloughed, some staff at work. We still want to keep that team spirit, so keep everybody updated, like group WhatsApp chats, things like that, regular calls, just so everybody feels informed and up to date what's going on. They're not worried at home about their job or what's happening at work. And there's some really good free tools available online for that. Things like Mental Health UK, quite good resources that are free to access. So here's a list of all different advice that I looked through to prepare this presentation from the World Health Organization, the regional public health bodies, all with slightly different guidance at the moment. And we've got the various optical bodies as well. So the Royal College of Ophthalmologists have been quite helpful with this presentation. If you go to the AOP website, there's some very good resources on there as well. And don't look at the College Optometrist website for those downloadable forms and that home test chart as well. So thank you very much. That comes to the end of the presentation part. So thank you for watching. That's my email address. You can contact me through Insight Optical Training. If you've got any questions, I might take a look at what we offer. So we've got our range of workshops, courses, our new qualifications, level 2, level 3 optical support, our bespoke training and CET. Don't forget to look at the SiteCare website, so sitecare.co.uk/training, because there's various training options for you on there, workshops and some online training modules that you can access, and SiteCare members do get special discount rates on those training options. So thank you very much for watching, and that's in the presentation. I hope you enjoy watching it, but don't forget to stay safe and keep practices nice and clean, and keep an eye on the guidance coming out, because hopefully in a few weeks' time we'll be back at work and seeing our patients.